definitely a way that we can talk about meditation and how mediumship is relevant to some of the other guests we're having on today that are going to teach us about mindfulness and breath work. And I really want to hear from you about ways we can learn to use our intuitive side, how intuition, mediumship, and meditation interact, and also how we can learn more about grief from you, like how people use mediumship to grieve.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to talk about, because I feel the first thing that people need to recognize or realize or understand is that we all have the ability to feel the presence of our loved ones on the other side. And I think a misconception is that only certain people have this gift, right? And also people don't always realize how subtle the information is when it comes in, because when we see movies in Hollywood, we're seeing like The Sixth Sense and these movies where it looks like the medium can't tell the difference between somebody who's living or dead, and it's like the burning bush, and it's really way more subtle than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel, especially in Western culture, we're kind of taught that either mediumship is evil or it's not real. But when you go to these other, tribal cultures, indigenous cultures, people communicate with their ancestors all the time. It's a very big part of their daily lives and since birth, right? So I think it's about just understanding that every human being is born with the intuition. And, people usually use the term, I should trust my gut. I should trust my gut. I mean, I'm sure all of us have said that in our lives. And what you're really saying when you're saying, I should trust my gut, you're saying, I should trust my psychic ability and my intuition. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really about understanding that we all have the potential and power and ability to communicate and feel the presence of people on the other side. Mm-hmm. And that's key, because if you don't believe that that's possible, then it's going to be harder to have the experience. And in meditation, in spaces where, people are, journeying or having these experiences, like I said, it can be subtle. So if you're seeing an image of your loved one in your mind, that can be a source of communication. If you're just feeling them, you can feel their presence near you and you're not seeing, but the feeling is still communication. Mm-hmm. Some people are clairaudient, so they hear more, but it isn't external auditory like you're hearing me talk to you now. It's in the mind. So I call them word thoughts from spirit, because it sounds like you're talking to yourself, but you're actually just feeling the communication, because the realm of spirit is so vast and there's so many possibilities, and it's just pure energy. So the way that they can communicate with us, I feel like it's like endless possibilities. I consider myself a lifelong student. I'm always growing and learning about the possibilities. But, in a deep meditation, when people say, I think I felt my mom, I felt her energy, that's real. Mm-hmm. That's mediumship. Mm-hmm. And it's about trusting that. And it's so healing, because, when we lose a loved one, first of all, that's trauma. That creates a trauma. And I feel like the attachment to the physical body, right? We're missing them. We're missing them being in the living with us. And then we're so in the attachment that the grief is so extreme. But if we can learn to understand the energy of the spirit world, it doesn't make the person come back. There's always going to be missing that person in the physical world. But when you have that understanding and knowingness that they're still with you, it's very healing. Mm-hmm. It's like they just moved to another plane. They've moved to another energetic field, but they can still communicate. So they're not lost. They're not completely gone. And it's also very healing for people that have had traumas with family members. Then the person passes away, and there's so many unresolved things, issues, things that were left unsaid, amends weren't able to be made in this realm, but those things can be healed. Mm-hmm, with the connection to the other side. And my mom died in 2013. I think I like my mom more now than I did when she was alive. I mean, it's just the reality of, I really believe that some things are better healed on the other side. So, and that's okay. I mean, because the opportunity to heal in this dimension for some people is very difficult because of trauma, because of fear, because of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. But I truly believe, after all the years of doing this work, that people on the other side, our loved ones, want us to heal. They want us to be happy. They don't, because they can see when we're in pain. They can see all of that stuff. And even if they've caused the pain, they're aware of the pain that they caused when they were here, which maybe they couldn't articulate when they were here, but now they can. So there are so many different things that mediumship can really bring if somebody's open to it, but it's about being open.
Yeah. And do you feel that a lot of people that come to you for your help are grieving and didn't get to say goodbye and like have something they want to say, or is it just missing the person? And what can that tell us about some of the deaths that have happened in COVID-19 when people couldn't say goodbye to their family members? Is there anything that they can do if they couldn't be there?
Yeah, and that's so painful. I mean, that's a big trauma within itself, losing a loved one and then not being able to be there with that person. And you know, even before COVID, you know, I would see people coming in so much grief because they couldn't make it at the person's last breath. They didn't make it. They were trying to get there and they missed it. And they hold on to this guilt and this pain. And it's never been my experience with communicating with somebody on the other side where they've been upset about that. In fact, they're like, no big deal. It's really okay. I'm okay. I want you to be okay now. Don't hold on to that, because holding on to those emotions can cause physical illness, mental illness, right? When you can't move out of the grief. And let me just say this, I think everybody has to grieve at their own pace. There's another misconception that floats around in the mediumship world where, you know, people think that if they're grieving too hard, they're going to keep their loved one trapped. And that's completely incorrect. It's, you know, I don't think that a medium should ever tell somebody how to grieve. I think we show up with support and to encourage, but people have to grieve in their own way. And it's just about showing your loved one's okay. You know, you can work through this, right? Right. But yeah, COVID, it's a trauma as a nation, as a world. We're in a trauma. And then the trauma of losing all these people and then not being able to be in the hospital with them. That's really tough. It's very tough.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of people, if they don't have a medium like you to help them with these moments, are there certain ways that they can sort of meditate on their intuition to improve their intuitive side? Or is it just like a whole career you have to take? Or
No, not at all. That's the misconception too, right? Because I think, and I know some mediums disagree with me. Some will say, oh no, a medium is born and you can't make a medium. Okay, maybe some mediums are more in touch than other people. I always use the saying, you know, everyone can play the piano. Not everybody's going to be a concert pianist, right? But there are ways that people can really sit in their meditation, and the goal or the key is to be open, to trust the experience. Because our brains want to tell us that we're making something up. Your brain wants to tell you you're imagining that's not real. And so you have to be in full surrender to just trust whatever comes in and let it come in. And I would encourage people, even in a meditation, right, to set the intention, you know, to be open to feeling the communication. Don't judge it. Don't try to talk yourself out of it. Let it happen. Just be present with that. And then after, write down the experiences you remember and write down the feelings associated with those experiences. You know, because something else that I encounter a lot is people will say, I had a dream of my loved one and they were just staring at me. They weren't saying anything. They were just staring at me. I think they're really mad, which isn't true. Right. Because we're expecting the spirit to communicate with us like I'm communicating with you, but they communicate through feeling, through word thoughts. So I always say, if somebody's having the experience of seeing a visitation of a loved one in a dream and they're not talking to you like I'm talking to you, it doesn't mean that anything's wrong. Go into your feeling. How did it feel in your heart? Because they're communicating with feeling a lot of the times. And that's actually more powerful. When you can feel something, the mind and the heart, right? Obviously you want them to be very connected, but I really feel the strongest faculty is the clairsentience, which is the feeling. Because when you feel it, that gets into your soul, right? You can really remember it. You can embody the experience. And I think that's very powerful.
Mm, cool. And how do you think I know you're training to be a psychedelic therapist, and hopefully someday we can work together.
We will.
I'm really looking forward to that. We'll be
Mm-hmm.
in crazy sessions. So how do you feel that psychedelics and have to do with mediumship and your work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like psychedelics can bring somebody into that space very quickly. Whereas, you know, if you're not open naturally, you're in doubt or in fear, and you can't move yourself out of your analytical mind, it's very difficult to sit in that space. I feel psychedelics can kind of just lunge you into that space, and it's a game changer. I mean, it's so healing. And I've seen so many people in you know, the community of you know, the psychedelic community that have had these experiences where they're like, I saw my mom was with me, I felt my mom, and just, it's so emotional and so healing. So it makes things happen very quickly. I always say it's like 30 years of therapy in like one night. I mean,
Yeah.
but then after, right, you can't be on psychedelics all day, every day. So like, what do you do? How do you integrate that experience? So the initial experience, I would hope, would create the understanding that it's possible to have the experience. And then the integration, I feel, should be just trusting that it's real. So then you can move into that space on a daily basis and walk between the worlds, right? Because I mean, I feel like, you know, the dimensions are very close together. There's not really much separation. It's about understanding the energetic shift between this dimension and the next dimension, how subtle it can actually be.
Yep, totally. So you just say that the whatever they're experiencing in the psychedelic journey, like, go with that as if it's real. That's your intuition coming out, or the other world coming out, and
right,
try and manifest that in your daily life.
Yeah. So like, cause the initial experience, especially on psychedelics, right, can be so powerful. And for some people it can be scary because maybe they thought mediumship was evil, or they grew up in an environment where they were told that. And then they have this very profound experience with the other side, and they really know this was real. I felt my mother or my father with me. So then it's about deconstructing patterns and systems, because that can be very it can be scary, right? If you've grown up in a system and then all of a sudden that system has a pinprick in it and you're like, oh no, my foundation feels rattled, and what do I do now? So there's a lot of different things, but I feel it's important for anybody working in the field, when somebody's having that experience, you have to, to help them through that, especially in the integration, that it's totally natural. This is a natural part of living, is being able to feel the presence of our ancestors, of spirit. It's just been taught to us that it's not real, or that it's evil. And that's sad, because I really feel we're so afraid to die in the West. The fear of the unknown, the fear of leaving, the fear of loss. And I really feel a big part of the healing that could come to our culture is to know that you're not really dead. You're just moving to another dimension, and to let people in the living know. And so we can help people have these transitions that are like, hey, you know what? I love you. I'm so sad you're going to be out of this plane, but I'm going to see you. Like, I'm going to talk to you when you're over there. We're always going to be together.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful for just what's happening with COVID and all the death and destruction.
It's a lot. I mean, it's an intense time. I mean, it's very, very intense. And I feel, I feel that if people know that they have this ability and they have the opportunity to feel their loved ones, although it won't bring them back into this physical realm where you can hug them and kiss them and all, and that's very difficult. It is. I mean, I've had loss too. I understand the loss, but it's just about understanding that they're still with us, and knowing that we can have that connection.
Totally. Anything else that you want to mention or talk about in these in this area?
Oh, gee. I don't know. There's so many things I could talk about.
Sure.
Let me see if there's any questions. Wait,
Yeah.
Cindy, how do you recommend to do a journal for someone who is just learning their gifts? Oh, okay. So some of the things that are really important going into, studying mediumship or being open is like I said, how subtle the experience can be. So mediums see, which is called clairvoyance. It's like a flash in the mind. So if you're seeing an image, write down what you're seeing. We hear clairaudience, but it's very subtle, like word thoughts. We feel, which is clairsentience, it's the feeling. And so it can get confusing sometimes for people because they're getting all of these different messages in different ways, and it feels like Pictionary, charades, and telephone, right? So if you're starting and you want to journal and you're open to it, I would just be in the meditation, get out of your own way, allow whatever comes in to come in, and then write down how you experienced it. And then it should start to come together. So it's not always going to feel very clear. Like sometimes you'll see an image of, what's an example? Like you'll see an image of Marlboro Reds and you're like, oh, I think that person smoked. And then you'll see a man, and then you'll feel a personality trait. And it's about understanding that they're communicating, showing you different aspects of who they were when they were here, in different ways. And then you have to know how to feel into that and understand what's really happening in the message. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions?
Oh, how do you cope with people that say things like you speak to demons? Okay. Yeah, it happens a lot. I will tell you this. I'm not somebody who feels I have to, convert anybody into my way of thinking. That doesn't work. And I respect other people's religious beliefs. I really, really do. I'm not trying to convert anybody into anything. I think that's important because I do know the fear that is really instilled in people that have been raised a certain way. And it is very scary when you've been told it's demons, right? But I only hope to really share information that might get people to think a little bit differently, or to not just brush away an experience, right away, to maybe think about it for a second and feel into it, because that's how change happens. It's not about forcing your belief system on anybody or telling them that they're wrong and you're right. That's not how it works. It's about planting seeds, because in an audience, I do a lot of live events with a lot of people in the room. And I ask at the beginning of every event, how many of you have had an experience with your loved one that you can't quite explain? And it's 95%. I have an audience of 300 people, it's 95% of people saying, I've had something. That's a high percentage. So they don't have to go communicate with spirits like I do. It's more about acknowledging that the experience is real and giving people validation that their experience is real, letting them know that it's a normal thing to have happen in your lifetime. And I hope that would kind of get rid of some of the fear associated around mediumship, because it's just so common that people have these experiences.
I actually forgot to tell you this the last time we spoke, the experience I had, that maybe one of the reasons why you're on this here, that I do believe in this. So I was in Brazil. I think I was 18. I did, as you know, I went to Brazil for a year in high school. But I have a friend in Brazil who does, I guess, what you call astral projection. Like while she's sleeping, she would go to other places, and was studying with some mentors about how to like increase the ability to do that. And I just thought it sounded a little bonkers. I was like, well, I don't really believe in that.
Yeah.
And my other friend was there too. And so for about an hour, we were sitting around at a kitchen table. That the oven was open the whole time, like just for whatever reason. And we were just talking. And I said, I need proof. And she said, well, here's your proof. And this is the other thing. And have you experienced this? And I said, like, I don't know. It's nothing I can really hang my hat on. And so after an hour of this dialogue back and forth, I just said, so this was Hanata and Thais, who may be watching or may watch this in the future. So they'll remember this. But so I just was like, I don't know. So I was about to get up and said, you know, I just need some hard proof. And then the oven, which no one was near and had just been sitting there for an hour, just slammed shut really loud, bang. And I was like, what just happened? You guys? And they were like, you said you needed proof. Not surprised at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. But you got like, that's good. I'm glad that was such a dramatic experience. Because some people
I was just like, screw it. I don't need that, you know? Yeah.
And one more thing, like that kind of sparked something when you were talking about astral projection and all this stuff about the ability that the consciousness has to travel. So also maybe something helpful for people that are, you know, they have a loved one that's in a coma or a loved one that's away, that's unable to communicate. You can communicate still with the soul. And just to share an example of, this was a game changer for me. I was doing an event and I was feeling the presence of this man, and I knew I was like, oh, this guy got in trouble with the law. He was arrested. I see him running from the police. I see drugs. I was seeing all this stuff. And then I went to this woman in the audience and I said, I'm hearing the name Garrett, right? So this is how it all played out, because I just hear it and then I give it. I don't know always what's going to happen. So the woman that I went to, she said, well, Garrett is alive. Garrett is my friend. I just had lunch with Garrett today before your show.
Okay. And
the man that you're describing is his best friend, who is being taken off of life support tomorrow at 1 p.m. Okay. So do you see, he was still alive, but the consciousness, like it came. So his friend that was on life support, unable to communicate, was able to give this super healing message, named his friend, to give to the woman in the audience who just had lunch with Garrett that day. I mean, there's no coincidence. Like, it's how do you can't make that up, right?
Yeah.
So I always encourage people, if you have a loved one that can't communicate, or because that's very difficult as well, just know that they can hear you. They can hear you. They can communicate. And then it's funny because I'll have spirits that come through. They're like, hey, I heard what you were saying about me on my deathbed when I was in a coma. Stop changing the will. You know, like, it's just like, they can hear you, you know? So it's
nice.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. That's really, I feel like this is really helpful, and very, I would love to hear more stories from you over next sessions, like have you back and tell us more about what's going on.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Anytime you want to have me on, I'm super excited to be a part of this. So thank you for inviting me. It's awesome. It's really cool. I love what you're doing, Hannah. It's like, I'm so proud of you. Like,
I'm so proud of you, Cindy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's talk again soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.